After saying "I do," this man abruptly left his wedding day with his wife standing there. September 1st, 2018 is a day that Krista Boland will remember for the rest of her life. After a series of tragedies and obstacles, she was finally marrying her longtime partner, Jeremy Bourassa. However, just when it looked like everything was under control and the wedding day was a success, Jeremy suddenly took off and left his wife standing there in her wedding dress without him. Cottage Grove, Minnesota residents Jeremy Bourassa and Krista Boland have created quite the legacy together. For nearly 15 years, the two have been inseparable. They had their first son together in 2009, and then had a second son a few years later. They were both lucky to have found their soulmate so early in life. It was quite obvious to anyone who knew them that they were going to be in it together for the long haul. Yet something was still missing from their relationship. While they'd managed to hit every relationship milestone along the way, there was something that had always evaded them. Despite years of happiness together and the fortifying experience of raising a family, Jeremy still had never gotten down on one knee to pop the big question to Krista. However, perhaps the possibility of marriage was secondary to the couple. When they weren't raising kids, they were out living their own lives. Krista was often involved with the community or going out with friends, while Jeremy was working as a mortgage loan processor while he aspired to take his DJing to new heights. While life seemed like a bed of roses for the couple, something would soon happen that would leave Krista utterly shocked. Calamity struck the family. In a nightmarish scenario, Krista learned that her niece and nephew had tragically perished in a house fire. As if to deepen the wound, this wouldn't be the last time that fire would strike her family. Not long after the first tragedy, yet another incident rocked the family. Krista's sister lost her home in yet another terrible house fire. The impact on the entire family was immediate and tremendous. Not only was Krista deeply affected by these incidents, but also her boyfriend Jeremy. As they thought over these events, he decided he needed to respond in his own way. Being a supportive partner, Jeremy decided to apply to become a part-time firefighter. It's practically a given that Krista must have had some reservations regarding this shift in directions, especially seeing as Jeremy was already a successful mortgage loan processor. However, the move was a touching decision. Jeremy, a man of the arts and mortgages, wanted to spend the rest of his walking life seeking to help those affected by the very thing that had caused his wife so much trauma and grief. He immediately started taking the training courses, and as fate would have it, it was around this time that Krista found herself in for another surprise. In 2018, the stone was finally turned. Jeremy at long last got down on one knee and asked Krista to marry him. Naturally, she was more than glad to accept. The sadness from recent events began to melt away, and life suddenly brought about a whole new feeling of excitement. Krista was now spending her days looking for that perfect dress, searching for the city's best venue, and going over every minute detail of planning that a bride-to-be needs. While everything seemed to be going right on schedule, something would happen that would turn the tables on her fantasy wedding and leave her feeling desperate. Many people dream about their wedding from the time they are a child. What they usually picture is a flashy venue filled to the brim with their friends and family, and tray after tray of amazing delicacies that'll be talked about for years to come. However, real life sometimes crushes your most joyful fantasies. Krista found this out the hard way when the venue she had scheduled called and canceled on her just days before the wedding. Panic set in. Now her perfect wedding stood as nothing more than a broken dream. However, all hope wasn't lost. Krista and Jeremy would put their heads together and muster up the perfect alternative. When their dream wedding plans seemed all but tarnished, Krista came up with the notion to have the wedding at Jeremy's place of employment. To begin with, Jeremy didn't know if it was possible, but he'd find out. He contacted his boss and asked if it was a possibility. Gratefully, the Firehouse captain had no problem with the plan and gave them his permission. So it was settled. The couple would at last be able to tie the knot, and they would do it at the St. Paul Park fire station. While it wasn't going to be set in the romantic venue Krista had hoped, In concept, it still promised to be quite memorable. However, Krista had one concern surrounding the idea. Firefighting is a profession that requires the utmost discipline and commitment. When one is sworn in to be a firefighter, they take an oath to fight fires whenever and however they can. During very serious emergencies, firefighters can even sometimes be transferred to other parts of the world. This brought up a frightening question in Krista's mind. What would happen if there was a fire during the wedding? During an interview with Care 11, she stated the following. "We talked about it. What if there's a call? I was like, you can let the other guys go. You're not leaving your wedding." However, what were the actual chances of an emergency breaking out during their wedding? Krista and Jeremy came to an agreement. Krista didn't want anything to ruin her day. Enough had happened already. So in the event that there was a fire, as she and Jeremy were saying their vows, it was agreed upon that they would leave the work to the other firemen. It didn't seem like too much to ask for on such a special day. The chances were pretty low that a fire would consume a whole block just because one man was missing. With no delay, the date of their wedding approached. Jeremy and Krista found themselves dressing up for a day whose memories would live with them for the rest of their lives. Little did Krista know that it would end much different than she had planned. As the fateful day arrived for Jeremy and Krista, everything seemed to be in order, even peaceful. The ceremony was a smash success and no calls had been placed to the fire station about blazes needing to be put out, so far. Then they started taking their wedding photos, and that's when Krista's nightmare came true. The fire alarm rang out through the entire station, and instantly the romance of the day faded. The firefighters started quickly preparing to go into battle, but as agreed, Jeremy didn't join. His fire suit stayed hung in his locker, and his helmet went untouched. Krista looked at her husband and made sure he'd stay put, and he complied. However, something would happen that would see Krista have a change of heart. Krista began to quickly grasp that even if it was her wedding day, life wasn't all about her, and there were people out there that needed help. During an interview with People, Krista said, "At first, I looked at him like, no, don't even think about it," and he wasn't going to think about it. She further stated, "But then we were taking a couple more pictures and I could actually hear how bad the fire was. It was in the city next to us that needed help, so it was an all-call where they call for extra men." The serene day was suddenly filled with tension, and Krista knew what she had to do. There are no doubts that Jeremy wanted to stay true to his wife and not run out while taking wedding photos, but he also wanted to fulfill his duty as a firefighter. He had taken an oath. His internal conflict was palpable, and Krista saw him befuddled. She said during an interview, "I just looked over at Jeremy and I could just see it in his eyes. He felt so torn. And I said, go ahead and go, babe. They need you." But even if she at last felt prepared to let him go, was Krista shocked that her husband chose fighting fires over celebrating his own wedding day? Krista was not at all surprised by her husband's actions that day. It's a difficult conundrum, and while many would choose getting married over fighting a fire, Jeremy was a bit different. Krista said Jeremy's super dedicated, so he's always going to every call he can go to. She further stated, he also works as a mortgage loan processor, so he does that full time. But there are times where he'll leave and go to a fire or a call. It happens at least a couple times a month. She also said about her husband, Jeremy really is amazing, and that's why I married him. He would do anything for anyone. He truly would. With that, one has to wonder what happened to the wedding in the end. After a few hours, the fire had been successfully extinguished. Jeremy and Krista were reunited and the wedding went on as it should have. While many might figure Krista could have been a little let down by the disturbance, she actually wasn't. She told Care 11, "I've got the rest of my life with him. They needed him for that moment." Krista's sacrifice was not at all unnoticed by her new spouse Jeremy. He told Care 11, "That just kind of put the icing on the cake, for I know she's the one for the rest of my life." While this all started as a personal tale to share with friends and family, they'd soon find that they caused quite a stir. While Krista and Jeremy's unconventional wedding day didn't seem like the kind of thing that would touch strangers all over the world, it eventually began to gain traction. A few posts of social media had many hopeless romantics blushing, and they couldn't help but pass the remarkable story forward. Eventually, major news outlets got a hold of the story. Krista and Jeremy would see their wedding hijinks being covered by big names like Inside Edition and Good Morning America, while some showed distaste for Jeremy's choice to leave his wife behind on their wedding day. It has to be pointed out that he did something very admirable by taking the time out of his very best day in order to help someone experiencing their worst.